Everybody, we're back. Technical problems aside, we've made it to the afternoon edition of Excel 10-Minute Leaders Live, joined in the studio from the other side of the planet to me. I'm in Singapore, he's in the UK. Lance Wantenaar. Lance, welcome to the show.
Graham, thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you here.
It's been an experience getting on this morning, but yeah, we're finally here.
A little bit off air there. Typical technical problems that we have in these kind of setups, but never mind, we find a way through. Resilience. All right, Lance, we've got 10 minutes together. We're going to talk about what you care about. So are you ready?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Let's do this. All right then. Easy sitter question for you at the beginning. What's on your business card?
Well, cybersecurity professional, interested in psychology, podcaster. That's basically me.
How do all those mix together? Are they easy bedfellows or are they different things entirely?
Interesting story. I got involved in psychology just out of personal interest. And then because I was working in cybersecurity, I started looking at the social engineering side because it deals with a lot of psychology. I started seeing a lot of correlation and a lot of mixes. And I started investigating how psychology is used in cybersecurity attacks. And that led me to start investigating this, you could say, Venn diagram of how all these things interlink. And then I started getting really fascinated with how people think, not just in stress situations, but just in day-to-day, and how they're tied into psychology, nutrition, health, meditation, all of these tie in together, and that's where I became really fascinated in the whole process. Where it gets really interesting is I started looking at the neuroscience, which areas of the brain is used during stress conditions, how's the physiology affected when a person's in a stress situation. And then the other thing that I really started looking into is that how can you change how you think? And that's why I started the podcast, was thinking or finding out how you can change how you think. And there's a number of ways that you can do through psychology and various other methods, which are very complicated. But the most basic principle that I wanted to understand is how can I tie it back to physiology? Because if you understand the physiology of how you physically react when you think and the interplay between the brain and the body, then it means that you've got some form of understanding and you can actually change how you think. And that's where the meditation and the breathing comes in. And that's why I got really involved with that and researching how breathing and meditation all links in. And I'm working with a scientist at the moment, learning a lot about his research that he's done over the last 20 years about meditation and how it links into something called the vagus nerve. A lot of people have potentially spoken about the vagus nerve. And it links the brain to the body and the heart and the guts. So when somebody says they've got a second brain, it's basically how people respond on a physical level to things like intuition, the emotions, how that all interplays. And the way that you can actually change how you think is to control your breathing. And this is where it gets really fascinating. People naturally change how they think when they breathe, when they're in a stress situation. Because they go into a situation, they start feeling stressed, they take a deep breath. And everybody tells their kids when they're young, when you're angry, take a breath, take a deep breath, count to 10. What that does is it signals through your physiology up to your brain to relax through the vagus nerve. And by doing a deep breath, you actually signal into your kind of guts to relax. And that relaxation response goes up to the brain for it to calm down. Now, what happens is when you're in a stress condition, you use the limbic part of your brain, which is the kind of fight or flight response mechanism. And when you get in a stress condition, your breathing starts to become shallower, your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up. And that forces you into stress conditions. That's where you start making emotional decisions. And when you start making emotional decisions, you start making mistakes when it comes to analyzing the whole situation. And that's where I got really fascinated is, okay, how can you change how you think through the breathing? And once I started understanding this interplay with it all, I started realizing, okay, you can change how you think and you can control how you think much better by improving breathing and learning meditation. Now, there's a lot of research which is coming out which supports all of this information, is that it changes your focus of control. They call it locus of control. And by learning how to breathe correctly and use meditation, it allows you to control the emotional aspects of what happens when you're in a situation. It gives you that momentary pause. And that's where things become really fascinating, is once you start learning that, then you could start adding on all the other things which allows you a bit more control. You can start controlling your stress levels. And what happens is when you start controlling your stress levels through your breathing, it improves your health and wellness, and it improves mental wellness and just general overall, you could say, improvement in, you could say, cognitive control. The interesting aspect was with the research that I was looking at is they found out by doing the breathing control, it activates the prefrontal cortex. So it allows you to make much better decisions because you're activating a different part of the brain. And that's why I became really fascinated and started interviewing all the people for my podcast, and why I find this really strong interplay between social engineering, psychology, neuroscience, and you could say physiology. So yeah, that's my beef.
That's a very long business card.
Yeah, it's a very long business card, yeah. But basically, I change how people think.
Can that be manipulated in social engineering? So
Yeah.
how we think? Are there some easy hacks that nefarious characters employ when they want
It's a
to
number of
get you
things.
to do things?
Yeah, there's a number of things. The easiest way is to induce a stress condition. The easiest way to induce a stress condition when it comes to phishing emails is use fear.
Like the
Fear of,
IRS or tax.
yeah, anything of that nature. Anything that gets a person into a panic mode to click a link or to take a response or take a phone call. Now, social engineering is really subtle and there's a lot of aspects to it. You can use various things like pre-framing and kind of loading the terms to get a person to react or to get the person to focus on it, which is why when you look at the phishing emails that are really very effective, is they loaded with terms in a specific way to predispose the person to take an action, which is why phishing emails and fears are, you could say, hacking process is so effective, is because you're preloading a person. If they really engaged in what they're doing on a day-to-day basis and they're not being aware of what's happening, they make the mistakes. The other thing that happens is that by preparing a person through the formatting of emails, it allows them to manipulate the situation. So they make the emails as believable as possible. So they'll use Amazon branding as an example to make it look like it's an official email. And that's how you can use presentation to build trust in the email, but then use the manipulation of fear to make a person click on a link. And one of the areas that I've been involved with, that I do a lot of work in, is something called Beck fraud, which is business email compromise. They basically trick people in changing bank accounts, and then people pay into those bank accounts. And it's a multi-billion-dollar business.
How do sensible people fall into that trap?
Inattention, multitasking, stress at work, health conditions. These are all factors that influence how you think and how it actually triggers an emotional reaction when you get an email. The biggest thing that I've seen is multitasking. People make a mistake because they've got multiple screens open. They're not focusing on one specific task at a time. They're trying to do multiple tasks at a time. They see something comes in, it looks believable, it kind of falls into that acceptable range. They go through the process. And that's where some of the psychological aspects come in, like confirmation bias and all of the other, you could say, subtle things that come in. That's where you can use those manipulation techniques to actually get people to make mistakes. And make no mistakes, it's a huge business. Google and Facebook fell prey to a phishing email like that, and they paid over $100 million to a guy in Lithuania for over a period of 3 years. So
it's
it's
fascinating. Lance, we're out of time. We
fine.
started late, but I think you've given just enough for people to be intrigued to find out more. So where do they
Thanks.
go, Lance, to check out your podcast and your work?
My podcast is called Thinking Like a Genius. I've got a website. I'm on Instagram and Twitter, what have you. And that's where people can reach out to me. I'm also on LinkedIn. So if people want to contact me, just look for my name on there, which is Lance Wantenaar.
Hey, Lance, it's great having you on the show. Short
Thank you
and
very
sweet
much.
today, but I think it was enough to get people interested in what you do.
Excellent. Thanks a lot.